Okay, May 2nd as we begin. And you're good to go there. Let's see. You now have new book, which is this one for the living children who are here. Math I learn tomorrow. Math I learn again on Wednesday. Outsiders test is graded and up on Skyward for those of you who did it. Those of you who did not, you're in the hallway right now. And then let's see. We'll cover and talk about new book in a moment. I will send out a remind today after school for those of you who in your first period they're doing the field day shirt. You have to have it turned in by Thursday. They cannot take them late. So I just figured I'd send out reminders to try and help you guys. If your class chose the tie-dye, it's 12. If they chose the normal colored shirt, it's 8. That was the tie-dye that my first period chose. They were trying to go for pink, and then they found like a pink lemonade, and they ended up going for that. Yeah. That's cool. Yeah, that works too. I'm just making sure that you guys, I'm just trying to help remind you guys so you guys don't forget. Next week, those of you who have B points will have the option of spending B points. I will be going out to Sam's Club and buying candy and food and bringing them in and giving you the option to spend points if you want to. You cannot go below 25 points, but you can spend more than 15 points. Some of the things at the bottom I can explain here in a moment because this year has been kind of screwy. But the first part, I'll be going out and getting random food items and cookies and stuff like that, giant pixie sticks, and then you can choose to spend points or not. I am going to track down my old podium. I know where it is. I'll be bringing my old podium in. Yay! I'm going to remove the sides from old podium and apply them to this one. So I have my old podium sides on this. So if you are still wanting to sign podium, you can. It's just not cheap. Also, beginning of the year, or before, I had like a whole list of the kids who had 100 B points or more. I'm sure you guys saw like Miss Snipes' name on there. They're, in theory, still giving me new whiteboards this summer, although they told me one of my whiteboards is going to plug in, which is weird. I don't know how you plug in a whiteboard, but apparently it's fancy. But apparently I'm going to have fancy whiteboards next year. Those little squares will be open to any 8th grader when you guys get back. I will have a second big white area that is just for kids who finish the year with 100 points or more. That's what gets your name permanently up on the wall. You become part of the Century Club. Every kid will get to know you in the future, and then you also get to sign like a separate board area if you finish with 100 points or more. Other than that, the things will be up there for those of you who want to spend points, and that'll be next week, Monday through Friday. I'll give you guys the opportunity to do that. Yay! All right. Now we're going to go through and talk about Outsiders test thing to help you guys out from there. There were a handful of questions we struggled on. I'm guessing because a lot of kids didn't read the book. And I have a feeling it was probably hard to answer questions if you had no idea what was going on in there. So to give you guys a quick run through, the ones that we struggled on, I'll take a look at it. So on this one, we're going to go ahead and have Destiny, while you're up, can you go ahead and shut doors so the kids in the hallway can't hear us go over questions? There you go. Trace. So on this one, the first chapter, so the opening scene where it talks about him walking home from the movie theater and talking about seeing Paul Newman and wanting to get a ride home and stuff like that, that's also at the very end of the book. It closes with him talking about, I'm leaving a movie theater, I'm thinking about Paul Newman and stuff like that. The reason being, at the end of The Outsiders, we find out this whole book was the essay he had to write for English, where they said you have to write in English about something that's important to you. He wrote about his friends because his friends were the things that were important to him. So it turns out The Outsiders book was the essay he wrote for his English class. So that was the connection from the very end back to the beginning.
It's a long essay.
Allie?
How long would it take to grade more than 100 pages?
I've got a feeling after you read the first little bit and find out what he's doing, you just go, yeah, that's pretty good. And you just read the whole thing and then give the kid an A. But I don't know. Next time you have to write a 5-page paper, you turn in 170, and then you let me. It's usually on mine why I give a page range, like 5 to 10, because first year teaching, I did not do that, and I had kids for a 5-page paper turn in 20 pages of rambling. Like they literally just sat at the computer like, I'm just going to write down everything in my, and they just went, and I was like, I've learned my lesson. So now I give you a minimum and a maximum because of kids that year. Yeah, the special kids always ruin it. What is it that Ponyboy learns about dairy when he gets the note from Soda Pop?
What?
That dairy was sorry. And he was like, I'm sorry I slapped you, come back home. And they talk to each other that way. Where Johnny and Ponyboy run into Bob, Randy, and the other Socias. That was at the park. Because that's when he got drowned in the big watery thing at the park. Dally goes after his final visit to Johnny's hospital. This is where he goes and does the robbing and the stealing. And that would be the grocery store. Where Ponyboy and his friends mostly hang out whenever they are inside. I had a lot of you who put down the empty lot. But the problem is it says when they're inside, and the empty lot is not inside. So the correct answer being inside the Curtis house.
Welcome back, sir.
There you go. Where Dally drives Johnny and Pony to after rescuing them from their week-long hideout. Restaurant is still around today. And that was the Dairy Queen. Which character joins in with the violence of the Rumble or chooses to stay out of it and has everyone call him a wussy?
Randy.
And that is Randy, who was like, my best friend died, I'm not going to go. By the way, Randy shows up in our book today. We're going to get to in a moment too. Which character has the conflict of stay in the hospital to get better or escape?
Dally.
That's going to be Dally. Bree has to make that decision.
Yeah, I'm gonna stab the doctor.
These characters argue about whether or not Johnny's really dead or who did the actual stabbing of Bob. This is why I wore the shirt last week that said I killed Bob, because that was Ponyboy who kept trying to convince Randy that he killed Bob. So that was between Ponyboy and Randy. Nathan?
You have an outsider's magnet.
I know. Kid got it for me at the end of the year last year.
Where?
Then our ones that were easier, we had 3 questions like everyone did well on. Who is the narrator main character? Ponyboy. People did well on that one. What did Johnny mean when he told Ponyboy to stay gold?
Daddy.
And I mean, that was one of the big things to learn, so the fact that most of you got that one, that's probably a big thing. And Cherry's boyfriend, you guys seem to know that one. So go you there. So, with that was then, this is now. If you did not finish or read Outsiders, you're probably still fine as far as this one goes. It is a sequel to Outsiders. It takes place in the same town, but not necessarily following the same characters. In the first opening chapter, it's going to talk about the fact that the Soch greaser thing faded out. Apparently, once kids started getting killed, no one thought it was as much fun, and so it's going to follow different characters. If you look at that little front cover thing, that big guy you see in the middle, his name is Brian. He's going to be the main character. The dude with crossed arms next to him is his best friend, Mark, and then the girl on the other side of him, and yes, that's a girl, that would be Kathy, who is who one of them is dating. In Outsiders, they had Tim Shepard, who was the leader of the Shepard gang. Do you remember Curly, his younger brother, who kept getting in jail, and they talk about like they put like cigarettes against each other's fingers? And
Yes.
Curly Shepard plays a big role in this one. He's like the main bad guy of this one. Ponyboy shows up, but he's a side character. He's a friend of one of theirs, and so he'll keep showing up throughout the entire thing. And then Randy, who is Bob's friend, shows up in here, and he'll be a character coming up. And then most of the other ones are mostly new-ish characters. Outsiders, I like, but I don't remember reading it as a kid. I remember reading this one. It was the first book as a kid that made me cry. There's death in this book, but the death is not what made me cry. It's like a complete non-death thing, but there's an event that happens that's heartbreaking.
That would be a death thing.
Would be, but it was not the death that hurt me on this one. So, our 5 things that you see up here. I'm not going to make you guys write these. I just want to sort of get your general opinions as we go through.
Thank you.
This book, unlike with Outsiders, which was about like fitting in and getting beat up and stuff like that, this one is much more about, drugs. As long as it's going to go down is, what do you do when your best friend goes down a path that you don't want to be in? And the idea is, there's no good answer. If your best friend starts going down a dark path and you follow them, you go down that same dark path. If you don't follow them, you lose your best friend. And so this story sort of follows what do you do when the people around you start getting into drugs. And so that's why I like the book, because for a lot of you, it is going to be a choice that you are going to have presented to you soon. So we're going to get you there in a little bit to help you out. I'm going to pause real quick on that. So for here, I just want to see your guys' agree or disagree with each one. The first one, anyone who uses illegal drugs daily is a bad person.
Are you kidding?
Now, illegal drugs, not like the things that, oh wait, Destiny, you can open the door now for Charlie. We just had to go past that first part. So the idea of the things that you learn about in wellness, where you guys have to make posters about things, those are the kind of drugs we're talking about. So, and not, they've tried it once, but the idea of if they use it every day, whether that be cocaine, marijuana, meth, I don't know what other things you guys have, cigarettes?
Crystal
Meth, for those of you who like your pretty drugs. Let's figure out. So let's go with one. Anyone who uses illegal drugs daily is a bad person. If you agree, raise hand. Disagree, raise hand. And then if you just got your seat moved and immediately turned around to lose more points, go ahead and raise your hand. Hey, good job with those. Yeah, turns to your knees or this one. Silly Daniel. I meant random kid who has no name. 2, getting revenge will help you feel better about a situation. I mean, of course, connects back when we did Shadow Club and stuff. A lot of this book is a big revenge story. It is going to deal with a character who does a small thing, and then someone gets revenge by doing a bigger thing, and then someone does a revenge by doing a bigger thing, and eventually, again, it's all fun and games until someone gets stabbed in a park. But that doesn't stop you from enjoying your revenge. So getting revenge will help you feel better about a situation. Agree? Disagree?
No, disagree.
Those of you
Yes.
about revenge or feeling better?
No. Why is it sticky? In like the freaking book.
They're brand new. They just came off the tree. So I have no idea.
They came from a maple tree.
Look at your own hand.
They came up, you mean they came out of the lab?
No, the tree. They came off the book tree.
Seems awful.
3. There are no bad people. There are only bad choices. In Outsiders, Ponyboy was a pretty good person. In this one, the main character opens the book sneaking into a bar trying to steal beer. And then in the first couple pages, he explains that he lies to women all the time because he just wants to manipulate them. He jumps straight into not being a good person. But it becomes that, at what point do your choices make you a bad person, or are there only bad choices? So on that one, there are no bad people, only bad choices. Raise your hand if you agree.
I agree.
Disagree. No, so you guys say there are bad people.
I'm a bad
I mean, we're here with you.
4, I would report my best friend who possessed illegal drugs, no matter what the consequences might be. As in, you find out here at school they have something in their locker that is something that could get them arrested. And again, once you find out, if you don't turn them in, you will also get in trouble. But that becomes that choice you have to make. So 4, I would agree. I would report my best friend. So agree, I would report my friend finding out they had stuff.
Bro, Teresa Fraud.
And disagree, I would not report.
No.
And 5, good always triumphs over evil in stories. Meaning in books, by the time you get to the end, the good guy has won.
No,
Agree? Disagree? Alright.
not always.
This was one of the first books I read as a kid where it did not end with like the good guy coming out on top. This one ends much more like actual life, where it just ends and you're like, well, is that good or bad? And you're like, well, you get to kind of make your choice. This one just sort of tells you what happens and then ends. There's no big wrap up. I guess Outsiders is kind of that way too. Schaefer.
Do we have to revise that again?
At some point. I mean, well, one, we finish the book next Friday. So we're done. We only have 3 weeks left, so I can't go longer than next Friday. But it's also a much shorter book. Like, the book doesn't even begin till page 9, so the first 8 pages are already done. But we'll read some together, but again, some of you will read on your own. Some of you will choose not to read at all. I'm not. Those of you who need the audiobook, again, I have a twttin page. By the way, twttin, because that's what I call it there and on there. If you look at the title, that was then, this is now, twttin, because much shorter than writing all that out. I just call it twttin.
I thought you were talking about.
And again, I have all the audiobook links on there to help you out.
I thought you were saying Twitter in all person language.
All right. So the book starts on page 9 talking about undercover cops. Well, actually, it says a plainclothes cop, and if you don't know what a plainclothes cop is, it just means undercover cop. When I Googled undercover cop, it came up with those pictures, and I was like, that is tight.
Well, it looks like Psycho Conan saying this.
That works for me. I think that one's from a Halloween costume website. All right. So starting off, main guy talking, that's Brian there in the middle. Chapter 1. Mark and me went down to the bar/pool hall about 2 or 3 blocks from where we lived with the sole intention of making some money. Now, we'd done that before. I was a really good pool player, especially for being just 16 years old. And what's more, I looked like a baby-faced kid who wouldn't know one ball from another. This, and the way Mark set me up, helped me hustle a lot of pool games. The bad deal is, kind of against the law to be in this pool hall if you're underage, because there's an adjoining bar. The good deal is, the bartender and owner was a good friend of mine, being the older brother of this chick I used to like. When the chick and me broke up, I still stayed friends with her brother, which is unusual in cases like that. Charlie, the bartender, was only 22, but he had a tough reputation and kept order real good. Yeah, Charlie, you get to be a main character in the book. What a happy day. We lived in kind of a rough part of town, and some pretty wild things went on in Charlie's bar. I looked around for a plainclothes cop when we went in. I can always tell a cop, but I didn't find one, so I went up to the bar and hopped on a bar stool. "Give me a beer," I said, and Charlie, who was cleaning glasses, just like every bartender you ever see, just gave me a dirty look instead. "Okay, a Coke. Your credit ain't so hot, Brian. You got cash?" "A dime! For crying out loud! Can't you let me charge a dime Coke? Cokes are 15 cents, and you already got $3 worth of Cokes charged here. And if you don't pay up this month, I'll have to beat it out of you." He said this real friendly like, but he meant it. We were friends, but Charlie was a businessman too. "I'll pay up, don't worry." Charlie gave me a lopsided grin. "I ain't worried, kid. You're the one who should be worried." I was, to tell the truth. Charlie's a big, tough guy, so a $3 beating up was something to worry about. As much fun as it is to have McGrath sass me. So, cost of a Coke in the book is 10 cents, because it was from way back a long time ago.
He said 15.
So, if they get $3 worth of Cokes, how many Cokes did they buy?
A lot.
30.
The fact that we have I Learn Math tomorrow scares me a little. So yeah, $3 divided by 10 cents makes 30 Cokes total.
Okay, but then you
So,
said 15. Though.
Nowadays, I said cost of a Coke, if you go out, make it easy, say $2, maybe a little bit more. So, you know that thing? If you're buying 30 Cokes at $2 each, that would be,
60. Let's go, I got this one.
if the Cokes are $3 a piece, then that would be,
What? 90.
that was a little scary. So the idea is that it's not really a $3 beating, it's probably closer to between a $60 and a $90 beating. That he's been borrowing money and then not paying back. So $3, I would agree, doesn't sound like much, but you transfer it up and it makes a bit more sense. Let's see. "Hey, Mark," Charlie called. "There ain't nobody here to hustle." Mark, who'd been scouting out the 2 guys playing pool, came up and sat down next to me. "Yeah, that's the truth." "It's just as well," Charlie said. "You guys are going to get in real bad trouble one of these days. Some guy's going to get hacked off when he finds out what you're doing, and you're going to get a pool stick rammed down your throats." "Man, no we ain't. Give me a Coke, Charlie." "We don't have any credit," I said glumly. Mark stared at Charlie disbelievingly. "You gotta be kidding. Man, when did we ever not pay our bill?" "Last month." "You said you'd add it on to this month's. That's what you said. So I don't see why you can't add 20 cents to that. 30 cents. And like I just told Brian, if I don't get that money pretty soon, I'm going to take it out of a couple of hides. And I'll get you the money tomorrow. If you give us the Cokes right now. Okay. Charlie gave in to Mark. Almost everybody does. It was a gift he had. It was like a gift for getting away with things. He could talk anyone into anything. But if I don't get the money by tomorrow, I'm going to come looking for you. I got chilled. I mean, I heard Charlie say that to another guy once. I also saw the guy after Charlie found him. But if Mark said he'd have $3 by tomorrow, then he'd have it. Speaking of looking for you, Charlie continued. The true flower child was in here asking for you. M&M? Mark asked. What'd he want? Man, how would I know? That's a weird kid. A nice guy, but weird. Yeah, I guess it would be hard to be a hippie in a hood's part of town. Speak for yourself, man. This part of town don't make nobody a hood. You're right, Mark said. But I really sounded profound there for a minute, huh? Charlie just gave him a funny look and got us the Cokes. It was later in the evening now, and some more customers came in, so Charlie quit talking to us and got pretty busy. If you're unfamiliar with hippies, one, at Camp Tecumseh, one of the groups was dressed as hippies. If you've watched South Park, they did like a whole episode
I love
about
that show.
hippies. But hippies will play a big role in the book as it sort of moves through there, and they're going to talk about hippies.
If you calculate for inflation, $3 is actually $26.62.
What?
$26.62.
Counting from when?
1966.
Yeah, that'd be around the right time, so there you go. Doesn't seem to work out well with the same math up there, but works for me. All right, and then some bigger hippies. Where are you going to get $3? I asked Mark. He finished off his Coke. I don't know. That bugged the heck out of me. Mark was always pulling stunts like that. I don't know. Mark had lived at my house ever since I was 10 and he was 9, and his parents shot each other in a drunken argument, and my old lady felt sorry for him and took him home to live with us. My mother wanted 100 kids, could have only one. So, till she got hold of Mark and had to be content feeding every stray cat that came along. There's no telling how many kids she might have picked up along the line if she could have afforded more than 2. Me and Mark. I've been friends with Mark long before he came to live with us. He had lived down the street, and it seemed to me that we'd always been together. We never had a fight. We never even had an argument. In looks, though, complete opposites. I'm a big guy, dark hair, eyes, the kind that looks like a St. Bernard puppy, which I don't mind, as most chicks cannot resist a St. Bernard puppy. Mark was small and compact, with strange golden eyes and hair to match, and a grin like a friendly lion. He was much stronger than he looked. He could tie me in arm wrestling. He was my best friend. We were like brothers. If you're unfamiliar with the St. Bernard puppy, that's the St. Bernard puppy. Brian likes to look like a St. Bernard puppy because it makes him look adorable and chicks dig him. Whereas Mark is much more on the scary side. He looks like a lion, like fierce, and like he would attack you if given the chance.
The small dude?
Yeah, the smaller guy. He's the small but fierce, scarier one, and the bigger guy is like the bigger, friendly, happier guy. Let's go look for M&M, Mark said abruptly. We left. It was dark outside and seemed a little chilly. Probably because school had just started. It always seems like fall when school starts, even if it's hot out. Charlie's bar was on a real crummy street with a lot of other bars whose bartenders kicked us out when we strolled in. A movie house, a drugstore, a second-hand clothes store that always had a sign in the window saying, "We buy almost anything." And from the looks of their clothes, they did. When my old lady went into the hospital, we got so low on money that I bought some clothes there. It's pretty lousy buying used clothes. We found M&M in the drugstore reading Newsweek, which shows you what a weird kid he was, since there were plenty of skin mags and things to read. A little kid like him shouldn't be reading that junk, I know, but he should at least want to. That's Newsweek, a magazine that most 13-year-olds probably don't read very much. But
I read those.
M&M is a little on the strange
I
side.
don't
Oh,
think
definitely. I know it's
newspapers
schizophrenia.
Yeah. Hey, Charlie said you was looking for us? Mark greeted him. M&M looked up at him. Yeah, how are you guys doing? M&M was the most serious guy I knew. He always had this wide-eyed, intent, trusting look on his face, but sometimes he smiled. And when he did, it was really great. He was an awful nice kid. Even if he was a little strange, he had big gray eyes, the kind you see on like war orphan posters. And I couldn't find a good example of war orphan posters, but I don't know if you guys ever watch actual TV and not streaming, but they have commercials like you can send money to the kids in Africa. That's what they're talking about. The kids, you have these giant baby eyes of like, you can't let us starve. That's what Eminem looks like when you look him in the eyes. These big eyes. Charcoal colored hair down past his ears and down to his eyebrows. He probably would have grown a beard, except 13 was too young for it. He always wore an old army jacket that was too big for him, and he went barefoot even after it started getting cold. Then his father got fed up with it, and Eminem got a pair of moccasins. He had a metal peace symbol hanging around his neck on a piece of rawhide string, and he got his nickname from his addiction to M&Ms, the kind of chocolate candy that melts in your mouth, not in your hand. For years, I'd never seen Eminem without a bag of that candy. I don't know how he ate those things all day long, day after day. And if I did that, my face would break out like nothing you've ever seen. And so again, army jacket is the one that they give you when you go out and join the army, so that's what we're talking about. The moccasins, I don't really think kids wear much these days, but they're usually like little cloth, leathery foot things you guys would cover. And so that's what they're talking about. It's close to Birkenstocks, I guess.
No. Hey, dudes.
Like, Hey Dudes probably be close. I had a pair of Hey Dudes, so yeah. So probably close to the Hey Dudes, like hippie footwear. They'd go barefoot whenever they could until they had to wear something. They'd wear this, and then he wears the peace symbol because, hippie. You want an M&M? He held out a bag toward us, and I shook my head, but Mark took one just to be polite since he didn't really like sweet stuff. You wanted to see us for something? Mark reminded him. Yeah, I did, but I forgot what for. He was like that, real absent-minded. My sister's home, he added as an afterthought. No kidding, asked Mark tactfully, thumbing through a bad magazine. Which one? Eminem had 1 million brothers and sisters, most of them younger. They all look... I have a question. Do you guys even know what Playboy is nowadays?
Yes,
Alright.
why are we talking
That was
about it in school?
Well, because that literally is in the book they just talked about that you're not reading. And so that was they talk about. I just realized that nowadays it's, people have moved away from it. It's like even like a brand that still has recognition.
Is it like a music beat? Like
Oh, no, it's got girls with not a lot of clothing on. And so that's what it's about.
Charlie.
Yeah. Eminem had 1 million brothers and sisters, most of them younger. They all looked alike, and it was really funny to see him out somewhere with 4 or 5 little carbon copies with dark hair and big serious eyes hanging all over him. I mean, if I had to be a babysitter day and night, I'd lose my temper and kill one of those brats. But then, I don't know, Eminem just never lost his temper. My older sister, Kathy, I mean, you know. Yeah, I remember, I said. Only I didn't remember too well. Where's she been? She went to a private school last year, and this summer, she's been staying with my aunt. She had to come home, though, because she ran out of money. She paid for it all with her own bread. Must be smart, I said. I couldn't remember what she looked like. I never paid any attention to her. She as smart as you? No, Eminem said, still reading. He wasn't bragging. He was telling the truth. He was just a very honest kid. Hey, let's go over to the bowling alley, Mark suggested. The drugstore wasn't exactly jumping with action. It was a school night, and nobody was hanging around. Hey, you can come too, Eminem. It was a long walk to the bowling alley.
Hey.
I wished for the 100th time that I had a car. I had to walk everywhere I went, as if he'd read my mind, which he was in the habit of doing. Mark said, I could hotwire us a car. Hey, that's a bad thing to do, Eminem said. Taking something that doesn't belong to you. It ain't stealing, it's borrowing. Yeah, well, you're on probation now for borrowing, so I don't think it's such a great idea. Mark could hotwire anything, and ever since he was 12 years old, he had hot-wired cars and driven them. He'd never had an accident, but he finally got caught at it, so now, once a week, he had to go downtown on his school lunch hour to see his probation officer and tell him how he was never going to steal cars anymore. I've been worried at first, afraid they were going to take Mark and put him in a boys' home, since he wasn't really my brother and didn't have a family. I was worried about Mark being locked up. I didn't need to. Mark always came through everything, untouched, unworried, and unaffected. I'm assuming you guys know what hot wiring is with the whole, what you see in the movies when they take the screwdriver and they cram it into the car and it just magically starts because movies are awesome like that. And so I actually, as a kid, we had a car that you had to hotwire because my dad was a mechanic and he lost the keys. And the only way to drive it was you had to go in there and pull the wires down and hotwire it because he had lost the key for it. And so that's what the hot wiring is. And then they talk about probation, which is after you've been arrested and then you get released. You have to check in with a police officer like every week and talk about your life. It's like therapy, but with the police, where you talk about not making poor choices. That's what probation is. And so that, one, you'll find out I talk about probation the last week of school. And then two, here we have Mark's on probation because apparently they frown on you borrowing cars, which is what Mark likes to do.
That's still joyriding.
Yeah, they still tend to frown on that a little bit.
It's still joyriding.
Okay, Mark shrugged. Don't get shook, Brian. Brian, Eminem said suddenly, were you named after the Lord? What? I said, stunned. For a minute I thought he meant God. Lord Brian, were you named after him? The poor kid had Brian and Byron mixed up. There was a guy named Lord Byron, which is very similar to Brian, but the R and the Y are flip-flopped. I decided to string him along. Yeah, I was. Was there a Lord Brian? Mark said. That's cool. I mean, I guess it's cool. Well, what'd this guy do anyway? Oh, I can't tell you in front of the kid, I answered. Eminem shook his head. He wrote poetry. He wrote long old poems. You ought to write poetry just to keep up the tradition of the Bryans. You ought to keep your mouth shut before I keep up the tradition of punching wise guys in the mouth. Eminem looked up at me, and I realized from his hurt, puzzled look, he wasn't trying to be smart and sassy. So I punched him on the shoulder and said, okay, I'll write poetry. How's this? And I recited a dirty limerick I'd heard somewhere that made him laugh and turn red at the same time. Mark thought I'd made it up and said, that was pretty cool. You just pop them off like that? And there we'll stop. A limerick is a 5-line poem. We finished on 17. Where typically you're making fun of somebody, and oftentimes there's dirty limericks, which you are welcome to Google on your own. We are not going to do that in class. There once was a man from Nantucket.